Dr. Sarah Mitchell had spent 3 years studying animal behavior in the remote forests of Kenya, but nothing had prepared her for the morning when everything changed. The research camp sat nestled between ancient baobab trees, their massive trunks casting long shadows across the red earth. Sarah had chosen this location because it offered the perfect vantage point to observe the complex social structures of the local wildlife without disturbing their natural patterns. At 28, Sarah was considered young for a field researcher, but her dedication had earned respect from colleagues worldwide. She had grown up on a farm in rural Montana, where her fascination with animals began during long summer days spent watching cattle and wild deer interact across the pastures. Her childhood dream of understanding animal communication had led her through years of rigorous academic study and, now to this remote corner of Africa. The morning started like any other. Sarah woke before dawn to the familiar chorus of birds and insects that marked the beginning of each day in the wilderness. She prepared her equipment methodically, checking camera batteries, adjusting lens settings, and reviewing her observation notes from the previous day. Her research focused on communication patterns between different species, particularly how various animals warned each other about approaching danger. As the sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah settled into her observation post. The elevated platform, built 20 feet above the ground in a sturdy acacia tree, provided an excellent view of the watering hole below. This natural gathering place attracted dozens of species throughout the day, creating a perfect laboratory for studying interspecies relationships. The first visitors arrived as expected. A small herd of zebras approached cautiously, their black and white stripes creating mesmerizing patterns in the early morning light. They moved with the careful precision of animals that knew danger could emerge from any direction. Sarah noted their behavior in her field journal, documenting how the lead mare tested the water while others maintained watch positions around the perimeter. Soon after, a family of elephants emerged from the thick brush. The matriarch led her clan with the wisdom that comes from decades of navigating both natural dangers and human encroachment. Sarah watched in fascination as the younger elephants played at the water's edge while their mothers remained vigilant. These gentle giants had learned to trust Sarah's presence over the months, recognizing that she posed no threat to their daily routines. The morning proceeded peacefully until something shifted in the atmosphere. Sarah noticed it first in the subtle changes among the animals. The zebras raised their heads higher, ears swiveling constantly. The elephants bunched closer together, their massive forms creating a protective circle around the calves. Even the chattering monkeys in the nearby trees fell silent. Then came the moment that would change everything. Through her binoculars, Sarah spotted movement in the tall grass beyond the watering hole. A magnificent lion emerged slowly, his golden mane catching the sunlight like a crown. This was Kivu, a male she had observed from a distance many times but never at such close range. He was massive, probably weighing close to 400 pounds, with scars across his face that told stories of territorial battles and successful hunts. What happened next defied everything Sarah thought she knew about predator behavior. Instead of approaching the watering hole with the typical stalking posture of a hunting lion, Kivu walked directly toward the base of her observation tree. His movements were deliberate but not aggressive, more curious than threatening. The other animals scattered, but not in the panicked rush Sarah expected. They moved away calmly, as if understanding that this moment was about something different. Kivu stopped directly below Sarah's platform and sat down. He looked up at her with golden eyes that seemed to hold intelligence beyond what scientific literature suggested was possible. For several minutes, they simply observed each other. Sarah felt her heart racing, not from fear but from the extraordinary nature of what was happening. In all her years of study, she had never heard of a wild lion deliberately seeking out human contact in this manner. The lion remained stationary for nearly an hour. During this time, Sarah noticed something remarkable happening around the watering hole. Despite the presence of an apex predator, other animals began returning. First, a small group of antelope approached cautiously. Then, several species of birds landed near the water's edge. It was as if Kivu's calm demeanor was sending a message throughout the area that this was not a hunting situation. Sarah began documenting everything, taking photographs and detailed notes about this unprecedented behavior. She had read about rare instances of wild animals forming unusual bonds with humans, but those stories always seemed too extraordinary to believe. Yet here she was, experiencing something that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal behavior and intelligence. As the day progressed, Kivu remained near the tree. He would occasionally stand and patrol a small area, but always return to the same spot below Sarah's platform. Other researchers at the camp, located 2 miles away, began to worry when Sarah missed her scheduled radio check-in. Dr. James Harrison, the expedition leader, decided to investigate. James approached the area carefully, knowing that a missed check-in could indicate anything from equipment failure to a dangerous encounter with wildlife. What he discovered left him speechless. Through his field glasses, he could see Sarah in her observation post, apparently unharmed, with a massive lion sitting calmly below like a faithful guard dog. The sight was so surreal that James initially questioned his own eyes. Lions simply did not behave this way around humans in the wild. Every protocol and safety measure they had established was based on maintaining distance from large predators. Yet here was clear evidence that those rules might not apply in every situation. James radioed back to base camp, describing the scene to the other team members. The response was immediate skepticism followed by urgent concern. Dr. Elizabeth Watson, the team's animal behaviorist, insisted on coming to assess the situation personally. Within an hour, 3 additional researchers had quietly positioned themselves at safe distances around the area. What they witnessed over the following hours challenged everything they thought they understood about lion behavior. Kivu showed no signs of aggression or territorial defense. Instead, he seemed to be actively protecting Sarah's position. When a group of spotted hyenas approached the watering hole, Kivu stood and issued a low warning growl that sent them retreating immediately. His message was clear: this area was under his protection. As afternoon turned to evening, Sarah faced a dilemma she had never imagined. Kivu showed no signs of leaving, and climbing down from the tree while he remained below seemed inadvisable, despite his apparent peaceful intentions. Wild animals could be unpredictable, and a 400-pound lion was not something to take chances with, regardless of how calm he appeared. The research team established a careful vigil as darkness approached. They had powerful lights and tranquilizer equipment available if the situation became dangerous, but no one wanted to intervene unless absolutely necessary. This was potentially a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to observe extraordinary animal behavior, and interfering could end the encounter permanently. As night fell, Kivu settled into a resting position but remained alert. Sarah, equipped with night vision equipment, continued her observations. The lion's behavior remained consistent, protective rather than predatory. He positioned himself where he could monitor all approaches to the tree while keeping Sarah's platform in his line of sight. The night brought new challenges and revelations. Other nocturnal predators moved through the area, but none approached closely while Kivu maintained his vigil. It became clear that his presence was serving as a protective barrier, not just for Sarah but for the entire immediate area. Smaller animals that would normally hide during night hours moved more freely around the watering hole. Sarah found herself documenting behavior that had never been recorded in scientific literature. She was witnessing what appeared to be interspecies cooperation on a level that challenged basic assumptions about predator-prey relationships. The lion was not just tolerating her presence, he seemed to be actively ensuring her safety. As dawn approached, Sarah reflected on the profound implications of what she was experiencing. This encounter was providing insights into animal intelligence and emotional capacity that could reshape understanding of wildlife behavior. But it also raised difficult questions about the ethical responsibilities of researchers when animals displayed such unexpected trust and attachment. The scientific community would undoubtedly demand extensive documentation and verification of her claims. Extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence, and Sarah knew that her reputation and career could depend on how she handled the documentation of this encounter. But, beyond the professional implications, she felt a deep personal responsibility to the magnificent creature that had chosen to trust her. Kivu stirred as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. He stood, stretched like a massive house cat, and looked up at Sarah one more time. Then, to her surprise and disappointment, he began walking away. Sarah watched through her binoculars as the great lion disappeared into the tall grass, leaving behind only paw prints in the red earth and memories that would last a lifetime. But, as Sarah prepared to climb down from her platform, she noticed something that made her heart race with anticipation. Kivu had stopped at the edge of the clearing and was looking back. The message in his golden eyes was unmistakable. This was not goodbye, but rather until tomorrow. The lion had not only chosen his human, he had established the beginning of a relationship that would challenge everything the scientific world thought it knew about the boundaries between species. The research team approached cautiously as Kivu finally disappeared completely into the bush. Sarah climbed down from her platform on shaking legs, her mind racing with the implications of what had just occurred. Dr. Harrison was the first to reach her, his face a mixture of relief and professional excitement. "Sarah, what exactly happened here?" he asked, though the evidence was clear in the photographs and video footage she had captured throughout the encounter. "I think," Sarah said slowly, still processing the enormity of the experience, "I just witnessed the beginning of something that could change how we understand animal consciousness and emotional intelligence. That lion made a deliberate choice to protect rather than hunt. He demonstrated planning, patience, and what can only be described as compassion." The team spent the morning examining the area, documenting paw prints, analyzing the territorial markings Kivu had left, and reviewing the extensive footage Sarah had captured. Every piece of evidence supported her account of the extraordinary encounter. But they all knew that the real test would come when they returned to observe whether this behavior would continue. As they walked back toward base camp, Sarah kept looking over her shoulder toward the spot where Kivu had maintained his vigil. Part of her wondered if she had imagined the intelligence she had seen in his eyes, the deliberate nature of his protection. But the evidence was undeniable, captured in photographs and witnessed by multiple researchers. What none of them could predict was that this first encounter was only the beginning of a relationship that would evolve in ways that challenged fundamental assumptions about the cognitive and emotional capabilities of wild animals. Kivu had indeed chosen his human, and their story was just beginning to unfold in ways that would captivate the scientific community and the world beyond. The following morning brought unexpected visitors to the research camp. Dr. Michael Barnes, a renowned wildlife behavioral specialist from Oxford University, had arrived with a small team of international observers. Word of Sarah's encounter with Kivu had spread quickly through academic channels, generating both excitement and skepticism within the scientific community. Sarah felt the weight of scrutiny as she prepared for what would likely be the most important day of her career. The presence of such distinguished colleagues meant that anything she documented would be subjected to intense analysis and peer review. But it also meant that if Kivu returned, the encounter would be witnessed by some of the most respected names in animal behavioral science. Dr. Barnes was known for his methodical approach and healthy skepticism toward extraordinary claims. He had spent 30 years studying predator behavior across multiple continents and had never documented anything resembling what Sarah described. His presence added both credibility and pressure to the situation. "Dr. Mitchell," he said during the morning briefing, "I want to be clear that I'm approaching this with an open mind, but also with the rigorous standards that extraordinary claims demand. If what you've described is accurate, it could revolutionize our understanding of feline cognitive capabilities." Sarah nodded, understanding the implications. "I appreciate your willingness to observe firsthand, Dr. Barnes. I know how unusual this sounds, but I'm confident in what I documented yesterday." The team established multiple observation points around the watering hole, each equipped with high-definition cameras and audio recording equipment. They wanted to capture every detail if Kivu returned, ensuring that the documentation would meet the highest scientific standards. As morning turned to afternoon, doubt began creeping into Sarah's mind. Perhaps yesterday had been a one-time occurrence, a random encounter that she had interpreted through the lens of wishful thinking. The presence of so many observers might have changed the dynamic entirely, scaring away the lion who had shown such remarkable behavior. Then, at exactly 3:47 p.m., the familiar hush fell over the watering hole. The zebras raised their heads, the birds quieted their chatter, and the elephants gathered their young closer. Sarah felt her heart skip as she recognized the signs that had preceded Kivu's appearance the day before. Dr. Barnes focused his binoculars on the tree line, his expression skeptical but alert. The other observers positioned themselves behind cameras and recording equipment, ready to document whatever emerged from the bush. Kivu appeared exactly as he had the previous day, walking calmly from the tall grass with purposeful strides. But, this time, his behavior was even more remarkable. Instead of going directly to Sarah's observation tree, he stopped in the center of the clearing and seemed to survey the multiple human observation posts that had been established around the area. The great lion's intelligence was on full display as he clearly assessed this new situation. His golden eyes moved from one observation point to another, taking in the presence of additional humans and equipment. For several minutes, he remained motionless in the center of the clearing, apparently making a decision about how to proceed. Dr. Barnes whispered into his radio headset, "This is extraordinary. The animal is clearly evaluating the changed circumstances. This level of situational awareness exceeds anything I've observed in wild felines." What happened next left the entire research team speechless. Kivu began what could only be described as a deliberate introduction process. He walked slowly to each observation position, stopping approximately 30 feet away from each hidden research post. At each location, he sat down for several minutes, allowing the observers to study him while he examined them in return. Sarah watched through her telephoto lens as the massive lion approached Dr. Barnes' position. The distinguished professor, who had studied dangerous predators for 3 decades, was visibly shaken by the directness of the encounter. Kivu sat calmly, maintaining eye contact with the hidden observer for nearly 10 minutes before moving on to the next position. "He's introducing himself to each of us individually," Sarah reported over the radio network. "This behavior suggests social intelligence that goes far beyond what we typically attribute to solitary predators." After completing his circuit of the observation posts, Kivu finally approached Sarah's tree. But even this familiar routine had evolved. Instead of simply sitting below the platform as he had the day before, he climbed partway up the sturdy trunk, positioning himself on a large branch about 10 feet below Sarah's position. The implications were staggering. Kivu was demonstrating not just comfort with human presence, but active engagement with multiple humans simultaneously. He had acknowledged each observer, assessed the new situation, and adapted his behavior accordingly while maintaining his apparent protective relationship with Sarah. Dr. Barnes emerged from his concealment, moving slowly but deliberately toward the base of Sarah's tree. His approach was a calculated risk, designed to test the lion's reactions to direct human interaction. The entire research team held their breath as the respected scientist positioned himself in clear view of the massive predator. Kivu observed Dr. Barnes' approach with calm attention but no signs of aggression. The lion's body language remained relaxed, suggesting that he understood the peaceful intentions of the human below. This level of behavioral assessment and response indicated cognitive capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about animal intelligence. "Dr. Mitchell," Dr. Barnes called up to Sarah, his voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances, "I believe we're witnessing behavior that has never been documented in wild lion populations. This animal is demonstrating social cognition, adaptive reasoning, and what appears to be emotional intelligence at levels that require immediate and extensive study." The afternoon session provided unprecedented documentation of interspecies communication. Kivu began displaying behaviors that seemed deliberately designed to facilitate observation and documentation. He positioned himself in locations that provided clear camera angles, remained motionless during photography sessions, and even appeared to respond to verbal cues from the research team. Dr. Elena Vesquez, a specialist in animal cognition from the University of Barcelona, noted that Kivu's behavior patterns suggested he understood the human interest in studying and documenting his actions. "This animal is not simply tolerating our presence," she observed. "He appears to be actively participating in the research process." As evening approached, Kivu established what could only be described as a formal routine. He descended from his tree position and began a systematic patrol of the area around the watering hole. His movements were deliberate and purposeful, clearly marking territorial boundaries while ensuring the safety of both the wildlife in the area and the human observers. During this patrol, something remarkable occurred that provided new insights into lions' social intelligence. A pride of lionesses appeared at the edge of the clearing, apparently drawn by Kivu's scent markings. The interaction that followed challenged everything the research team thought they understood about lion territorial behavior. Instead of the aggressive displays typically associated with territorial encounters, Kivu approached the pride with what could only be described as diplomatic behavior. He positioned himself between the lionesses and the human observation posts, effectively communicating that this area was under his protection but that the other lions were welcome to share the space. The lead lioness, a magnificent female with alert amber eyes, seemed to understand the message. She approached Kivu cautiously, and the two great cats engaged in a complex series of vocalizations and body language exchanges. To the amazement of the research team, the entire pride settled into resting positions around the watering hole, creating a peaceful coexistence scenario that defied conventional understanding of lion territorial behavior. Sarah documented this interaction with growing excitement. She was witnessing not just unusual behavior from a single animal, but evidence of complex social communication that could reshape understanding of predator intelligence and social organization. The implications extended far beyond her original research into animal communication patterns. Dr. Barnes spent the evening reviewing footage and comparing notes with his international colleagues. The consensus was unanimous: they were documenting behavior that had never been recorded in scientific literature. The challenge would be presenting these findings in a way that the broader scientific community could accept and validate. "The evidence is undeniable," Dr. Barnes stated during the evening briefing. "This lion is demonstrating cognitive capabilities that require us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about animal intelligence. The question now is how we proceed with documentation and study while respecting the extraordinary trust this animal has placed in our research team." As night fell, Kivu resumed his protective position near Sarah's observation tree. But the dynamic had evolved significantly from the previous evening. The presence of the pride created a complex social situation that none of the researchers had anticipated. The lionesses remained at respectful distances, but their presence added layers of behavioral complexity that would require extensive analysis. Sarah found herself at the center of what was becoming one of the most significant wildlife behavioral studies in modern history. The relationship that had begun with a single lion's unexpected choice to trust a human researcher had evolved into a complex social dynamic involving multiple animals and challenging fundamental assumptions about predator intelligence and emotional capacity. The international research team established round-the-clock observation schedules, ensuring that every moment of this extraordinary development would be documented with scientific rigor. Camera traps were positioned throughout the area, motion sensors recorded movement patterns, and audio equipment captured the complex vocalizations that seemed to serve as communication between Kivu and both the pride members and the human observers. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who had begun this assignment as a young researcher studying basic animal communication, found herself at the forefront of discoveries that could revolutionize understanding of animal consciousness and intelligence. The lion who had chosen her as his human had opened a window into cognitive capabilities that science was only beginning to comprehend. But, perhaps most remarkably, the trust that Kivu had initially extended to Sarah was expanding to encompass the entire research team. The great lion was not just tolerating human presence, he was actively facilitating scientific study while maintaining his protective relationship with the woman who had first earned his remarkable confidence. As the second day of this extraordinary encounter drew to a close, it became clear that this was no longer a simple research observation. It had evolved into a complex interspecies relationship that would require careful management, extensive documentation, and a complete re-evaluation of assumptions about the emotional and cognitive lives of wild animals. The jungle had indeed fallen quiet when the lion chose his human, but from that silence was emerging a story that would speak volumes about the untapped potential for understanding and connection between species that science had never thought possible. 6 months after that first extraordinary encounter, Dr. Sarah Mitchell found herself facing a dilemma that would define not only her career but potentially the future of wildlife conservation. The relationship between Kivu and the research team had evolved into something unprecedented in the scientific world, but it had also attracted attention that threatened to destroy the very thing that made it special. News of the lion who had chosen a human had spread far beyond academic circles. Documentary crews, wildlife photographers, and thrill-seeking tourists were beginning to inquire about visiting the research site. The Kenyan government was under pressure to either exploit this unique situation for tourism revenue or shut it down to prevent potential disasters. Sarah stood in her observation post, watching Kivu patrol the watering hole with his characteristic calm confidence. Over the months, their daily routine had become as natural as breathing. Each morning, the great lion would appear at the edge of the clearing, acknowledge Sarah with what could only be described as a greeting, and then settle into his protective position near her tree. The pride had become regular participants in this unusual community. The lionesses had learned to coordinate their hunting activities with Kivu's protective schedule, ensuring that the area around the watering hole remained a safe zone while they pursued prey in surrounding territories. This unprecedented cooperation had created a wildlife sanctuary unlike anything documented in nature. Dr. Barnes, who had extended his stay indefinitely to study this phenomenon, emerged from his morning data review with troubling news. "Sarah, we've received word that the documentary crew from National Geographic will arrive next week, followed by teams from the BBC and Animal Planet. The government is also sending a delegation to assess the tourism potential of the site." Sarah felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. She had known this moment would come eventually, but she had hoped for more time to understand the full implications of what they were documenting. The introduction of cameras, crowds, and commercial interests could destroy the delicate trust that had developed between Kivu and the research team. "What are our options?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Legally, we can't prevent access to the area," Dr. Barnes replied. "This is government land, and our research permits don't grant us exclusive use. But I've been working on a proposal that might offer some protection for both the animals and the integrity of our research." The proposal Dr. Barnes had developed was ambitious and would require cooperation from multiple international organizations. He suggested establishing the area as a protected research reserve, limiting access to qualified scientists and implementing strict protocols for any media coverage. The plan would require approval from the Kenyan Wildlife Service, backing from international conservation organizations, and significant funding to compensate for lost tourism revenue. As they discussed the proposal, Kivu appeared at the edge of the clearing as he had every morning for 6 months. But something was different. The great lion moved more slowly than usual, and Sarah noticed a slight limp in his left rear leg. Through her binoculars, she could see fresh scratches across his shoulder and neck. "He's been in a fight," Sarah reported, her voice tight with concern. "Territorial dispute, probably with the pride that's been moving through the area to the south." Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had become a permanent member of the research team, focused her telephoto lens on Kivu's injuries. "The wounds are superficial but recent. This could be related to the increased attention our research has been receiving. Other lion populations might be feeling pressure from human activity in surrounding areas. The possibility that their presence was indirectly causing conflict among the local wildlife added urgency to their conservation efforts." Sarah climbed down from her observation post and approached the supply cache where they kept basic veterinary supplies. If Kivu would allow it, she wanted to clean and treat his wounds before they became infected. What happened next demonstrated the extraordinary level of trust that had developed between the lion and the research team. When Sarah approached with antiseptic and bandaging materials, Kivu didn't retreat as wild animals typically would. Instead, he settled into a resting position that provided clear access to his injuries. Dr. Barnes documented every moment as Sarah carefully cleaned the scratches and applied antiseptic to prevent infection. Kivu remained completely still throughout the process, occasionally glancing at Sarah but showing no signs of stress or aggression. The other members of the research team maintained safe distances while recording this unprecedented example of interspecies medical cooperation. This level of trust represents an evolutionary leap in human-animal relationships, Dr. Barnes commented as Sarah finished treating the wounds. "We're witnessing behavior that suggests these animals are capable of understanding and appreciating human intentions in ways we never thought possible." The medical treatment seemed to strengthen rather than strain the bond between Kivu and the team. Over the following days, the great lion demonstrated even more remarkable behaviors. He began bringing injured or sick members of his pride to the area near the research camp, apparently expecting similar treatment for his family members. This development created both opportunities and challenges for the research team. They were not equipped to serve as veterinarians for an entire pride of lions, but they couldn't ignore animals that were clearly seeking help. Dr. Vasquez contacted colleagues at the University of Nairobi's veterinary school, arranging for periodic visits from qualified wildlife veterinarians. The arrival of professional veterinary care transformed the research site into something unique in the world of wildlife conservation. The combination of behavioral research, medical treatment, and natural habitat preservation created a model that could potentially be replicated in other locations where human-wildlife conflict was becoming problematic. Meanwhile, pressure continued mounting from commercial interests and government officials who saw the opportunity for significant tourism revenue. Sarah received daily calls from media representatives offering substantial sums for exclusive access to film Kivu and document their relationship. The offers were tempting, particularly given the chronic funding challenges faced by wildlife research projects. But Sarah had learned to read Kivu's moods and behaviors with remarkable accuracy over the months, and she could sense that the increasing human activity in the area was causing him stress. Vehicles passed on distant roads more frequently, aircraft flew overhead conducting surveys for potential tourism infrastructure, and the constant presence of additional researchers was beginning to disrupt the peaceful environment that had made their relationship possible. The turning point came during a visit from a government tourism committee. The officials arrived with plans for observation platforms, visitor walkways, and commercial facilities that would accommodate hundreds of tourists daily. As they toured the area, making loud plans for development, Kivu's behavior changed dramatically. The great lion, who had been calm and approachable for months, became agitated and defensive. He positioned himself between the government officials and Sarah's observation tree, displaying clear signs of territorial aggression. His message was unmistakable: these particular humans were not welcome in his sanctuary. Dr. Barnes recognized the crisis moment they were facing. "Sarah, we need to make a decision that will affect not just our research, but Kivu's welfare and the future of this entire ecosystem. The government will move forward with tourism development unless we can provide a compelling alternative." That evening, Sarah made the most difficult decision of her career. She activated the emergency protocols that Dr. Barnes had developed, reaching out to a network of international conservation organizations with a proposal that would either save their research site or end her involvement entirely. The proposal was radical: relocate Kivu and his pride to a completely protected reserve where they could continue their unique relationship with researchers without interference from commercial interests. The plan would require tranquilizing and transporting several adult lions to a new habitat, a process that carried significant risks but offered the only hope for preserving what they had discovered. Within 72 hours, responses began arriving from conservation organizations around the world. The Jane Goodall Institute offered funding and logistical support. The World Wildlife Fund pledged resources for habitat preparation. Even the African Wildlife Foundation, known for its cautious approach to innovative conservation methods, endorsed the relocation plan. But the most crucial approval came from an unexpected source. The government of Botswana offered to provide protected land in the Okavango Delta region, where Kivu and his pride could live without human interference while continuing to participate in carefully controlled research activities. The relocation process would be complex and dangerous. Adult lions do not typically adapt well to new territories, and the stress of tranquilization and transport could be fatal. But the alternative was watching their remarkable discovery become a commercial spectacle that would ultimately destroy the trust and natural behaviors that made it scientifically valuable. Sarah spent her final weeks at the original research site documenting every aspect of Kivu's behavior and their daily routines. She wanted to ensure that when they relocated to Botswana, they could recreate as many familiar elements as possible to ease the transition for the lions. On the morning of the relocation, Sarah felt emotions she couldn't have anticipated when this journey began. Kivu approached her observation tree for what might be the last time in this familiar setting. As she watched him settle into his customary protective position, she realized that their relationship had evolved far beyond scientific observation. The great lion had indeed chosen his human, but, in doing so, he had also chosen to trust an entire species that had historically been his greatest threat. The responsibility of protecting that trust had become the defining mission of Sarah's life and career. The tranquilization process went smoothly, with Kivu and his pride being carefully transported to their new home in the Okavango Delta. Within weeks of the relocation, they had adapted to their new territory and resumed their extraordinary relationship with the research team. The new location offered better protection from commercial interference while providing even richer opportunities for studying interspecies communication and cooperation. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, once a young researcher studying basic animal communication, had become the director of the world's first interspecies cooperation research facility. The lion who had chosen his human had not only changed her life but had opened new pathways for understanding the cognitive and emotional capabilities of wild animals. Years later, as Sarah watched Kivu's offspring display the same remarkable trust and intelligence that their father had demonstrated, she reflected on how a single moment of connection had evolved into a new model for human-wildlife relationships. The jungle had fallen quiet when the lion chose his human, but from that silence had emerged a voice that spoke to the possibility of coexistence and mutual respect between species. The story of Kivu and Sarah became a turning point in wildlife conservation, proving that animals were capable of far more complex relationships with humans than science had previously imagined. Their bond demonstrated that with patience, respect, and genuine care for animal welfare, it was possible to bridge the gap between species in ways that benefited both wildlife and human understanding of the natural world.